Welcome to IAS project. In this video, you will learn about Neolithic Age. We will be doing 3 videos for Neolithic Age and this is the first video. Before we go into the lecture, please look at this question. Consider the below statements regarding Neolithic Age in India. 4 statements have been given here and the question is, which of the above statements are correct? This question is basically to test your knowledge. You will get the answer for this question in this video. In our previous lectures, we have completed all these topics. Now, the only remaining topic in the Stone Age is Neolithic Age, that is nothing but the New Stone Age. Previously, we have divided Stone Age into 3 divisions. They are Paleolithic Age, Mesolithic Age and Neolithic Age. We made these divisions on basis of what was the geological age during this period, what are the type and technology of stone tools that were used by these people, and then the last one was what were the type of food sources these people were having. This is also called as subsistence base. Accordingly, we have seen that Paleolithic Age was the first part of Stone Age. Therefore, it is also the oldest part of the Stone Age. And we called the newest part of Stone Age as Neolithic Age. Neo means new, lithic means stone. Therefore, Neolithic Age is also called as New Stone Age. The timeline for Neolithic Age in India is roughly from 10,000 years ago to 3,000 years ago. Also, when we talked about Mesolithic Age, we have stated that Mesolithic Age is kind of a transitional phase from Paleolithic Age to Neolithic Age. This means that Mesolithic Age has some features of Paleolithic Age as well as Neolithic Age. Let's start with Neolithic Age. If we look at the timeline of Neolithic Age, it varies greatly within the subcontinent because Neolithic Age did not start at the same time everywhere in the subcontinent. For example, in the northern part of subcontinent and in the western part of subcontinent. Northern means the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Western means the present day southern Pakistan region can be considered as western part of subcontinent. In both these regions, Neolithic Age started earlier when compared to eastern region, that is Northeast India as well as West Bengal and Bihar, and southern region, that is the peninsular part of India. So, in northern and western parts of the subcontinent, Neolithic Age started somewhere around 10,000 years ago. But in the southern part of the subcontinent, Neolithic Age started very late. In some regions, it is as late as 3,000 years ago. Therefore, we must keep in mind that whenever we say Neolithic Age, the timeline is varying. So, Neolithic Age in northern and western parts of subcontinent started earlier. This meant that in these regions, the Neolithic Age also lasted longer compared to southern or eastern parts of subcontinent. As these people started Neolithic Age earlier, they were relatively more advanced compared to their eastern and southern contemporaries also. So, if we look at northern and western parts and southern and eastern parts of subcontinent, we can see that in northern and western part, Neolithic Age started early. In southern and eastern parts, it started late. In northern and western parts, it lasted longer. In southern and eastern parts, it did not last long. Also, in northern and western part, the Neolithic Age was advanced, whereas in southern and eastern parts, it was less advanced. Advanced and less advanced are comparative terms and we are comparing both these regions. So this is how the Neolithic Age timeline is different in northern and western parts of subcontinent when compared to southern and eastern parts of the subcontinent. If we want to study about Neolithic Age people, we have archaeological remains. What kind of archaeological remains are there? They are nothing but burnt food grains, animal bones, burial sites, stone tools and implements, their pottery, mud brick houses or stone houses Neolithic Age people have built, and Neolithic Age cave paintings. If we look here, we did not have any kind of burnt grains from Paleolithic Age because in Paleolithic Age, people did not do agriculture. They most probably did not consume food grains. But in Neolithic Age, people did agriculture, they consumed food grains. That is why burnt food grains from Neolithic Age people can be used to study their culture today. Similarly, burial sites. In Paleolithic Age, we did not study about any particular burial traditions. But in the case of Neolithic people, we see that burial traditions have developed. And burial traditions were very elaborate, which we will learn about shortly. Similarly, in Paleolithic age, there was no pottery. But in Neolithic age, pottery was developed. So, by studying pottery also, we can study about Neolithic age cultures. Paleolithic people also did not build any kind of houses. They were mainly living in caves and rock shelters. But in the case of Neolithic age people, they built basic houses. So those houses also help us to understand their culture. Cave paintings started from Upper Paleolithic age. Before that, there were no cave paintings. So if we want to study about Lower Paleolithic age people or Middle Paleolithic age people, cave paintings cannot help us because those people did not do any cave paintings. But Neolithic age people did cave paintings. That is why we can use cave paintings also to study about Neolithic age people. So if there is a prelims question, which of the below can be used to study Lower Paleolithic age people? And options are given: burnt food grains, pottery, stone houses, and cave paintings. And let's say the question is asking which of the above are correct. Then all the above will be false because these entities were not existing during Lower Paleolithic period. They existed during Neolithic age. That is why they can be used to study Neolithic age people. So I hope you understand this distinction clearly. Let's talk more about Neolithic age. The characteristic feature of Neolithic age was that these people did domestication of animals as well as cultivation of plants. What do we mean by domestication? Domestication is basically a gradual process. In domestication, what happens is you take wild animals and plants and then you grow them or rear them. After growing them or rearing them, these wild animals and plants become domesticated. And this process is basically called as domestication. So basically, domestication is a process of converting wild animals and plants into domesticated species. And domestication does not happen overnight. It is basically a gradual process and it takes hundreds and thousands of years. When did domestication start? Domestication started when climate change happened around 12,000 years ago. That is, beginning of Holocene epoch. In history terminology, beginning of Holocene epoch is nothing but beginning of Mesolithic age, because both happened around 12,000 years ago. But we have seen here that domestication is a gradual process and it takes hundreds and thousands of years. Therefore, domestication of animals and plants is basically considered as a characteristic feature of Neolithic age. Although domestication began roughly around 12,000 years ago, that is during the start of Mesolithic period, it was only truly developed during Neolithic age. Now the real question is, why did the Neolithic people do domestication of animals and plants? The answer would be because they wanted plants and animals to have certain desired traits so that they can exploit these desired traits and get food or work out of those animals. For example, in the case of plants, the desired traits would be high yield of edible content. For example, if there are two mango trees and one mango tree was giving bigger fruits than another, then the Neolithic people selected the mango tree which was having bigger fruits and they planted more of such mango trees. Similarly, for other crops also. So, higher yield of edible content was the important factor when Neolithic people selected a plant for domestication. Similarly, if we talk about food grains, strong stem plants were selected because if the stem was strong, it would be able to bear the food grains. If the stem was weak, it won't be able to bear the food grains. It would just buckle under the load of the food grains and the food grains would be damaged. Another important trait which was appreciated in the plants was disease resistance as well as drought resistance. So these were the desired traits in plants which were used or which were exploited by Neolithic age people for the purpose of domestication. Similarly, if we look at animals, the desired trait in animals was the animal needed to be less aggressive. For example, let's say there are two oxen and you want to select one of them for, let's say, transportation purpose. Then you would select a strong animal and you would also like the animal to be less aggressive. Because if the ox was going to attack you, you would not be able to use that axe to do the transportation work. Therefore, they selected less aggressive natured animals. Also strong animals. They also selected animals with high disease resistance. The most important factor probably was fertility, because if an animal was able to produce more number of offsprings, then such kind of animal was selected. So some of the desired traits in animals were the animal should be less aggressive, it should have high disease resistance, and it should have high fertility rate. So we have seen that domestication is a gradual process. So after thousands of years, what happened was the domesticated animals started to show significant differences when compared to their wild ancestors. For example, in the case of cattle, what happened was the domesticated cattle had smaller teeth because they don't have to go into the wild to get grass. Now grass was being given by the Neolithic people. Similarly, they also had smaller horns because they did not need to fight among each other for, let's say, food or mating or anything else, because they were now available within the herd that was being taken care of by the Neolithic Age people. So because of the domestication, over many generations, what happened was domesticated plants as well as animals started to show significant differences when compared to their wild ancestors. Plants also showed significant differences. I can give you one example. If you look at corn today, corn looks something like this. I'm a very bad artist, but let's say something like this. Corn is nothing but bhutta. So you have all those, grain here. But thousands of years ago, corn did not look like this. It was simply like this, like 5 or 6 grains. That's all. But after thousands of years and repeated domestication process, corn that was giving only few grains transformed into corn which was giving hundreds of grains. Similarly, rice also. Wild rice did not have high yield, but the domesticated species of rice had very high yield. The same applies to other cereals like wheat, barley, ragi, oats, and all others. So this is the advantage of domestication. All these desired traits were now obtained after thousands of years. Now let's look at some of the features of Neolithic Age. The first and the most important feature was the start of food production. The advent of food production is basically the characteristic feature of Neolithic Age. Characteristic feature means it is the defining feature of Neolithic Age people. So if there is a question in prelims, advent of food production started in which age, the answer would be Neolithic Age. That is why we call it as a characteristic feature. The earliest domesticated plants were most probably wheat and barley. After domesticating wheat and barley, Neolithic people also domesticated other crops like rice, millets, and some pulses. So Neolithic people cultivated land, they grew food grains, they grew fruits also. We know that India is a very large country. Because of this, the climate changes at different regions. Depending on the climate, Neolithic Age people grew different crops. For example, if we take the case of South India, in South India, horse gram, black gram, ragi, and millets were grown. But if we take the region of Gangetic Plains, that is in Uttar Pradesh, rice was grown. In fact, rice was first grown in India near Allahabad, or let's say near Prayagraj, at a place called Mahagada. This could also be a prelims question. If we look at Kashmir, wheat as well as lentils were grown. What are lentils? Lentils are basically those pulses which have a lens shape. Lens shape is something like this. For example, like idli. Idli is lens shaped. Let's talk about lentils briefly because it is important from the point of view of economy, geography, as well as environment. So what are lentils? Lentils are being shown here. Lentils are nothing but those pulses that are lens shaped. For example, pigeon pea, green gram, red gram, black gram, and Bengal gram, all these are lentils. Now, when we talked about lentils, we talked about pulses. We said that lentils are pulses. What exactly are pulses? Pulses are nothing but dried edible seeds from legume plants. So we must observe that all legume plants are not pulses, but dried edible seeds of some legume plants are called as pulses. Examples of pulses can be dry beans, dry peas, chickpeas, and lentils. Lentils are obviously pulses. So we can see here that within pulses, we have different kind, let's say 1, 2, 3 and 4, and lentils is a type of pulses. All these pulses are not lentils. So when we talked about pulses, we use some word called as legume plants. Now let's see what are legume plants. Legumes are basically any plants from the family of Fabaceae or Leguminosae. Don't worry about the pronunciation or spelling. Just try to remember the concept. So what are legumes? Legumes are any plants of Fabaceae or Leguminosae family. Legumes are basically the umbrella family that includes all the beans, peas and pulses. So if you see here, in legumes, we have soybeans, peanuts, fresh peas, fresh beans as well as pulses. Legumes are also sometimes called as peas in a pod. What do we mean by this? For example, if you look at fresh beans here, in Hindi, we call this as chilka, right? So within the chilka, we have peas. This basically is the outer covering, which is called as a pod. And inside, we have peas. So peas in a pod is simply a legume. Look here also. We have peanuts. Peanuts are inside. And outside we have a pod, which is nothing but the outer layer. So peas in a pod are nothing but legumes. The same goes for soybeans also. So let's conclude this very quickly. All lentils are pulses, but some pulses are not lentils. All pulses are legumes, but some legumes are not pulses. Similarly, all lentils are legumes. I hope you are able to appreciate this hierarchy. We can also write it like this. Lentils are basically a subset of pulses, and pulses are a subset of legumes. So that was about legumes, pulses and lentils. Alright, back to Neolithic Age. During the Neolithic Age, plough was not invented. Very important from the point of view of prelims exam. In the case of India, plough was probably invented in Bronze Age, and some Chalcolithic cultures also had plough. But Neolithic Age people did not use plough. Although they did agriculture, they did not invent plough. What did they use then? For example, in Piklihal, which is a Neolithic site in Karnataka, we have found evidence of stone hoes and digging sticks. Stone hoes and digging sticks are basically a lower technology compared to a plough. Plough is basically a higher technology. Stone hoe was basically something like this. This is basically a stick, and now there was a tool here like this. And this sharp edge tool was used to make hole in the ground. And within that hole, seeds were put and agriculture was done. Similarly, digging stick also. Basically, it is nothing but a stick. This was used to make holes in the ground, and within the holes, the seeds were put and agriculture was done. But plough, as I said, is a superior technology, because with the help of plough, the soils could be tilled into a greater depth. Okay, this was not possible with hoe or a digging stick. Now the next feature of Neolithic Age was pottery. Invention of pottery is very interesting. We just talked about how agriculture was started in Neolithic Age. So when agriculture started, people got food grains at the end of harvest period. They consumed some food grains, and the remaining they had to save for their future. Such kind of remaining food grains is called as surplus food grains. Surplus simply means excess. So they wanted to store this surplus food grains. Initially, they dug holes in the ground and they put these food grains here. But they observed that because of moisture and water leaking and other animals which were going to eat these food grains damaged very quickly. Then they tried to make baskets out of leaves and other plant-based objects. But these baskets were also not helpful because the moisture would get inside and damage the food grains. So due to this, there was a new innovation made, which was nothing but pottery. So we can say that the invention of pottery was an innovation for the storage of surplus food grains that were obtained from cultivation of plants. Now, Mesolithic people and Paleolithic people did not do any cultivation of plants, so there was no need for pottery to them. But in the case of Neolithic Age, pottery became a necessity. That is why the Greek philosopher Plato said, necessity is the mother of all inventions. So pottery was basically an invention that came out of a necessity to store food grains that were produced by Neolithic Age people. This is the case in India. Initially, the pottery was made by hand. We call such kind of pottery as handmade pottery. Eventually, they invented what is called as a potter's wheel. Once the potter's wheel was invented, they made even superior quality of pottery. Which was called as wheel thrown pottery. Wheel thrown pottery, the word thrown here means simply turned. So basically such kind of pots were turned on wheel. I hope you know what is a potter's wheel. Potter's wheel is basically a kind of wheel like this. There is a small platform here and there is a wheel, and this wheel is rotated fast, and once it is rotated, wet clay is put here, and now this wet clay is made into a pot like this. Potter's wheel was basically a revolution if we talk about Neolithic age. Neolithic people used large clay pots for storage of food grains as well as for cooking of food. They also made use of large urns. Urn is nothing but a pot, okay? They used large urns made of clay as coffins for burying their dead people. This was a relatively new idea even within Neolithic age. Okay, this started, let's say, at the middle or at the end of Neolithic age, not in the beginning of the Neolithic age. But in the beginning of the Neolithic age, clay pots were used for storage of food grains as well as cooking of food. If we look at the type of pottery that Neolithic age people used, three kind of potteries were important in India. The first one is black burnished ware, then we have grey ware, and lastly we have matte impressed ware. Let's talk about these kinds of pottery. First, if you look at grey ware, it is basically grey in color. It was made out of clay and it was fired at less temperatures. We use the term fired for pottery because they are burnt in kilns so that the clay pot, which is basically wet mud, can become hard and get other desired properties. Please observe that when the clay pots are fired, many kind of chemical as well as metallurgical changes happen within the material of the pot. So this was probably the first kind of pottery that was invented. Soon afterwards, they also made black burnished ware. What is burnishing? Burnishing is basically a technique of polishing of pottery. Polishing simply means you make the surface smooth. For example, if you look at this picture, you can see that the surface is not smooth. It is a coarse surface. So if you want to turn this coarse surface into smooth surface, what Neolithic people used to do was they used to take a small piece of wood which had a straight edge, and with this straight edge they used to turn this coarse surface into a smooth surface. This is simply called as burnishing. Once the wet clay pot is burnished, then it is fired, and after firing it used to turn into black color or dark grey color. So that is why such kind of burnished pottery is also called as black burnished pottery or black burnished ware. The last type is impressed ware. When we say impression, it is basically a kind of decoration. So burnishing is a kind of polishing, whereas impression is basically a kind of decoration. Once the wet clay pot was made, they used to impress the surface of the pot with many objects like combs, shells, or paddy straw, and all these. So such kind of impressions made by combs, shells, paddy straw, or mats were basically a kind of decoration. And such impressed clay pots, when they were fired, they were called as impressed ware or impressed pottery. Please note here, all these three images actually did not belong to Neolithic age in India. They are only for your understanding purpose. I hope you understand the Neolithic age pottery. You will be studying pottery from now on at every individual stage. For example, you will learn about the new kinds of pottery that were developed in Chalcolithic cultures, and afterwards in Harappan bronze culture, in Aryan culture, and then during the Mahajanapada period, and so on. At each phase, we will be having new type of pottery, and we will be giving a name to this type of pottery. For example, painted grey ware pottery or ochre color pottery. When we give name to such kind of pottery, we can associate such cultures with that pottery. So pottery is very important in identifying the culture of the people. If we are talking about Neolithic age people, we have seen that Neolithic age people used grey pottery, black burnished ware, and impressed ware. The next feature of Neolithic age was the animal domestication and animal herding. This is also considered as a characteristic feature of Neolithic age because it is a defining feature of Neolithic age people. Previously, before Neolithic age, people did not do animal domestication and animal herding. If we talk about what animals were domesticated by these people, probably the first animal to be domesticated was dog. Soon after domesticating dog, Neolithic age people also domesticated goats, sheep, cattle, and other animals like pigs. All these animals were mainly domesticated for their meat, not for their milk, because in Neolithic age, people did not consume milk from these animals. They only butchered them and they ate that meat. But in the case of Bronze Age, for example, in the case of Harappan culture, we have scientific evidence that people in Harappan culture also consumed milk as well as dairy products. But this was not the case with Neolithic age people. Neolithic age people reared animals only for their meat, not for their milk. If you like this video, please subscribe. You can download these materials and presentations at our Telegram channel, which is IAS Project. The link is given below. Thank you.